And hello to all of you out there in podcast world. This is the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies and TV most of the time. I'm your host, Brandon Davis, and this is Zone-i-Sodes that you're listening to, our complete, thorough walk through every episode of the Twilight Zone. And we finally made it to season 2. And we are on actually episode 2 of season 2. I got mixed up there for a second. But but I have here with me.
I'm Scott, and I love the fact that every time we can read you, Brandon, that if you don't like the episode, you say we like TV occasionally or from time to time. And that automatically tells me that we're in for a very long episode. Because for some reason, we talk more about the episodes we don't like than the episodes we do.
Now this one, I'm not spoiling it. This is not the worst we've seen, but there's just a few things in this episode that bug me. But we'll get to that.
I look forward to
it. But we are talking about, not to bury the lead, we are talking about episode 2 of season 2, "The Man in the Bottle," which aired on CBS October 7th, 1960. And this is our first encounter with a genie on the Twilight Zone, a very well-dressed genie.
He's very dapper. Very dapper.
But not our first time with Vivi Janice, who we saw last season in The Fever, and also played an annoying wife. So we've got several things to talk about here. But Scott, let's get started with you though. What are your first impressions of The Man in the Bottle?
Well, it took us 2 seasons to get a genie. We've had the devil, we've had guardian angels. Sooner or later, we're going to get a genie. This episode isn't seen much, and the big joke about the episode is the twist ending, which is telegraphed like no other. And I just dropped my microphone.
Yes, it is.
But, I think the thing I remember most about this is usually genies try to pretend that their wishes aren't going to completely ruin your life. This guy's like, make sure you decide well, because I'm going to screw with you no matter what you say. So plan this out.
I know.
Good.
I've never seen a genie give so much upfront advice before, and the people still screwing it up.
Maybe you shouldn't wish. Maybe you should just put my bottle somewhere else. You're just not cut out for this. It kind of reminds me of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. It was like one of the first ones, actually, when the Simpsons were good. And Homer has a monkey's paw, and you get wishes for every toe or finger on the paw. And on his last wish, he says, I'm going to wish for something that it can't screw up. I'm going to wish for a turkey sandwich on white with mayonnaise, lettuce, tomato. And then he gets the turkey sandwich. He eats it. He's like, mayo's good, bread's soft. The turkey's a little dry. The turkey's a little dry. Just can't win.
And actually, Scott, you can tell this episode's thrown me for a loop because I didn't have you give your plot summary, and I didn't read Rod's first word.
It's season 2. One of these days, we'll figure this stuff out. We're only we've only done 8 episodes. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So let's have you do that, then I'll give my first impression.
Well, Arthur and Edna own an antique shop that is putting them under, and they'll be soon bankrupt. But Arthur is a kind soul, or so we're told. And when an old woman comes in with a wine bottle she found in a ditch and tries to make some money off of it, Arthur, even though he knows the wine bottle is completely worthless, gives her $1. Well, Edna points out that was probably not the best approach since they can't even afford the electric and gas bill right now. But Arthur says it will all work out in the end. That's when the bottle opens up and a genie wearing a 3-piece suit, or close to a 3-piece suit, appears and tells them they have 4. Yes, 4, not 3 wishes. I don't know why. And the genie tells them to wish carefully. Arthur and Edna do not follow directions, as we've already discussed. Arthur asks for $1 million. He asks to fix the glass pane on his display case. And he asks to be a world leader of a country in the 20th century, and you can assume where that goes. At the end, Arthur and Edna have no money. They have, they're back out of Germany. But at least their glass case is still fixed until Arthur breaks it at the end. And the genie goes on to screw with somebody else's life, we assume.
And these are Rod's first words for this episode, and it's after going through a whole season of just hearing his voice, it's still cool these first couple episodes to see him actually in person narrating the episode. And coming up in episodes, we'll see him make his entrances in a little more creative way. But this one, just like the last episode, we just sort of see the camera move forward and pan onto Rod. But here's what he says. Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Castle, gentle and infinitely patient people whose lives have been a hope chest with a rusty lock and a lost set of keys. But in just a moment, that hope chest will be opened, and an improbable phantom will try to bedeck the drabness of these two people's failure-laden lives with the gold and precious stones of fulfillment. Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Castle, standing on the outskirts and about to enter the Twilight Zone.
And Nazi Germany.
Oh, we'll get to Nazi Germany in a second.
But yes, we will.
But yeah, this episode started out promising for me. I thought, this is something we haven't seen before, a genie thing. I said, I can't wait to see how Rod deals with this. But when they started with the 4 wishes thing, I was like, I don't know about this.
Continuity.
And and I'm not as picky about continuity and about suspension of disbelief as people are, but this one, for some reason, the whole thing with the taxes later on, and they had to pay way too much tax for that $1 million. But
I was going to say, I forgot in my synopsis, they pay taxes that would even make Bernie Sanders blush. I think it comes out to be 94% tax rate.
I don't know what the market was like on that day, but yeah, this episode, I mean, once again, I don't think it was the actors' fault. I think the actors are good. I do like Luther Adler, who's the lead, who plays Arthur Castle and Adolf Hitler for 30 seconds. But and then the guy who plays the genie, Joseph Ruskin, I actually think gives an interesting performance. He's your atypical genie, which is they don't do the big guy with the arms crossed wearing the fez and all that stuff. And so they go sort of atypical on that, which I do enjoy. I just think they went a little too outlandish. I think this episode could have been kept a little simpler, and still say what it was trying to say. But overall, I mean, it's not the worst episode we've seen, and we'll get into that later. But Scott, what are some things in this episode that worked for you?
The beginning. I like the idea of discussing good people who are down on their luck, but even when everything is falling apart around them and they're about ready to completely go bankrupt and they can't pay their bills, the one bill they should pay, they can't. But even then, Arthur is just a decent person. And when Edna gives him a little bit of trouble, and she really doesn't even fight him too much when he gives the $1 to the older woman, he says, what was I going to do? Not let her eat? And then Edna points out, well, we're not going to be believed very soon if you keep doing that. that interaction between Arthur and Edna, I really enjoyed. And when the genie shows up, you're thinking, okay, this could be interesting. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a parable to, be careful what you wish for and all of that. But up until the IRS man shows up, I'm with this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think even when they ask for $1 million and they start giving out to their friends, I'm like, well, that makes sense. I mean, if you're going to give out your last $1, you're going to give out your last $1 million too. And I think if they would have just played off that you were too nice to make these wishes, maybe that would have worked out. But as soon as the IRS man cometh, I leaveth this episode.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, the beginning started out promising, and you've got good actors playing these roles. I did like I liked the setup. I liked I like the whole thing with, the Arthur's generosity and letting the lady have the bottle. I liked, I like the whole thing about, these are good, honest people who really just want a better lot in life. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a really interesting morality tale here. And once again, like I mentioned before, the actor playing the genie was interesting, and it was a different take, and he was a little more, he seemed a little more sinister than what you would expect a genie to be at first. But
He struck me as a guy who was going to sell you a vacuum cleaner door to door. And I
yeah,
say this as a guy who used to sell vacuum cleaners door to door.
yeah, but he had this debonair charm about him that wasn't totally off-putting, and I think that lent itself well. And I like, yeah, I liked where it was going. I liked the first wish of them wanting to, have the glass put back together, and I liked when they wished for the million and they brought all their friends and all the townspeople in. But you're right, when the tax guy comes, is when the episode starts going into a little more outlandish territory that it doesn't need to go to. And I think it could be a lot more simpler than that. But yeah, it started out really, really promising, and I liked where Rod was going, but it took a few twists and turns that it didn't need to go. So Scott, let's start with, I think, the meat of the episode. What doesn't work for you about the man in the bottle?
There's an internet law. It's called Godwin's Law. It was created in 1990 by a guy surprisingly named Godwin, and he used to frequent Usenets, which were old email message boards before we had email or the internet, really. And he pointed out that and I quote here, as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Hitler approaches 1. So basically, if you wait long enough in an online conversation, sooner or later Hitler's going to come into it. So I think we can take Godwin's Law here. If you write enough Twilight Zone episodes, sooner or later Hitler's going to come into play. And I say that knowing that in 3 more seasons or 2 more seasons, one of my favorite episodes of the Twilight Zone will involve Hitler. And so I joke that we probably shouldn't have brought Hitler into the conversation, knowing that sooner or later I'm going to enjoy having that conversation. But yeah, I mean, as soon as he starts talking about, I want power, I'm like, uh-oh, this can't go well.
Yeah.
But I have to be careful with this. I can't just have power. I think it's Edna who points out you're just going to get elected out of office. So, so he's like, so no, I have to be a dictator. But I don't want to be a dictator in like a country years ago, because then it'll be like I'll die of malaria. So I need to be a dictator of a contemporary country in this century. And I'm just like, oh God, here it comes.
and he wouldn't be Mussolini. So.
Well, if he was Mussolini, he'd wind up hanging upside down, crucified. So he may have got the better end of the stick on this deal.
Well, it's either that or the bunker.
Oh my goodness, Edna just disappears. She's not involved in this. I guess she's Ava. I don't know, but she's nowhere to be found. And Arthur is sitting there, and they got the camera on his back, and you're just waiting for him to turn around with that stupid ass mustache. And I guess that's where they had to get the 4 wishes from, is the fact that they had to have him wish out of the mess. So if they had done 3 wishes, we wouldn't have got the broken glass or something. I don't know. So I definitely don't like that. I think that twist is too on the nose. Yeah. I think the way the actor who plays Arthur plays it, when he turns around, he looks like the guy from Hogan's Heroes.
Colonel Klink, or no, Sergeant Schultz.
Yeah, Schultz. I see nothing. I hear nothing. He looks like more like Schultz than he does Hitler, with his pudgy face and his dumb look.
But, I know. It seemed to me like it was something out of, Mel Brooks. I thought, this is 1960, and this is only 15 years after Hitler's death and everything, and I'm like, and it's played so broadly, and it's not being any kind of satire.
And here's the thing.
It's
We're going to get very hard hitting, not just World War II episodes. We've dealt with World War II. We're going to get very hard hitting Hitler Germany conversations in Twilight Zone. There is an episode that is actually in Auschwitz. Okay. So we definitely go there, and they go there well. But this is not how you go to Hitler well at all.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that. and as I already mentioned, I know the tax rate was a little wonky in the 60s, but there's no way in hell the tax rate was 94.7%. So I don't care what bracket you're in. So they immediately pulled me out of the episode with the bad guy is the IRS and they only have $5 left. Again, a simple solution would have been you have so many new friends, like happens when you win the lottery sometimes.
Yeah.
Your money disappears before you know it, and you're stuck. That would have been much more of a good message, because it's not the IRS taking your money. It's you being poorly managing of your money, and it goes away so quickly. You could have done the exact same story, and it would have had the same punch, but the IRS dude was just over the top as well, too.
Yeah, that Hitler thing was just, I don't know. I can't get over that. It's just so, I mean, I see where they were going. I see where they were going, but
I don't know if they saw where they were going.
Well, I don't know. Just when he turns around in that chair, it looks like something out of, I don't know. Like it's very Mel Brooks-ish. I'm like, this is just, this is like a decade before they would start doing those really wild Hitler satires and everything. But yeah, I don't know. He just plays it so broadly and so over dramatic that you can't help but laugh at it. You shouldn't. But it's they could have dealt with that final wish, I think, in a little better place. And and the tax guy, I think it's a little too clever that the tax guy shows up out of nowhere just a half an hour after they get that money. But um, but there's a lot of logic and plot holes, and like I said, I usually don't mind logic and plot holes, but they're just so over the top in this episode that it's hard to it's hard to ignore them. But yeah, and the four wishes thing I think felt a little too inconvenient, because it was just sort of ice at the beginning so they could break the glass, have it put back together, and then do that little cap at the end where it breaks again, and and they laugh it off. But I think everything in this episode just seems a little too convenient for me, and I think that's sort of my biggest issue with it. Anything else that doesn't work for you, or have we covered it?
No, I think you made it very clear. There is the fact that this episode's a little too cute.
Yeah, and it didn't need to be. It didn't need to be. It started out just fine, and it could have been to the earth people who really learned that what they have is better than anything they could imagine, and they just sort of decided to go a little over the top with it. So I think I think we've covered pretty much. Any more final thoughts on the episode, Scott, before we get to our rankings?
No.
Well, tell our listeners what you told me before, because Scott has this new Twilight Zone companion book. What does the author say about this episode?
Okay, so the Twilight Zone Companion, second edition by Mark Scott Secree, who still has not answered my email, even though I give him a plug on every single episode now. He always gives like a little feedback on what the episode was like, was some fun stuff about filming. So I'm like, okay, I'll see if there's any kind of anecdote I can use for this thing. The second episode to be produced, written by Serling, was a pretty pale affair. There are a couple of nice special effects shots. A broken glass display case heals itself, and the shards of a bottle reassemble into a unblemished whole. And Joseph Rushkin, in modern dress, makes a dapper and menacing genie. But overall, The episode isn't terribly interesting. Period. Let's move on to the next episode. Okay. Thank you for nothing, Mark. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I will give him this. Yeah, he mentioned this. The special effects are not terrible in this episode. They actually don't. They don't date all that much. I think they were done simply, and they work all right. But that's one of the few things you can give this episode. But Scott, let's go to our rankings here. And if you're just joining us for this episode, we rank our Twilight Zone episodes on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the very best that Twilight Zone has to offer. 5 being an average Twilight Zone episode, which compared to other TV shows is probably their best, and 1 being the Fever, the Chaser, and as Scott always says, the Bewitched Pool, which I have to wait 2 years to watch.
February 2020.
I have a feeling, when people build up a movie saying how good something is and then you watch it and it's not all that great to you, I'm wondering if this isn't going to be all that bad to me because you built up how bad it is.
Well, I told you what I plan on doing with this. I want to do a live commentary where we watch the entire episode and just film your reaction to it. That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
It will be a last hurrah as we leave the Twilight Zone.
Kind of sad that we're going to end it on a whimper.
Oh, we'll do a recap show. It'll be
fun. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we'll have to do a recap of the whole series. But yeah. So Scott, where in your 1 to 10 rankings do you place Man in the Bottle?
Oh man, this is hard because unlike some of the episodes that are just complete and total pits of nothing, this episode has some strong points. I mean, again, the characters are likable up until when the IRS guy shows up. The genie is one of the most interesting genies I've seen, and we obviously have seen a lot of genies in our time. So I don't want to score this thing, very low, but obviously it is not an average Twilight Zone episode. It was below a Twilight Zone episode. So I'm going to give it 3 chubby Hitlers out of 10.
I was thinking compared to I think I mentioned last week that now that we've been through a whole season of Twilight Zone and we've seen some of the best, I have a feeling our rankings this season are going to be a little tougher. You tend to grade on a tougher curve than I do, but I think that they're going to be measured a little differently. And last week I gave King 9 Will Not Return a 5, which had we watched it early on in the first season, I might have given it a little bit of higher ranking. But this episode is not as good as King 9. So, yeah, it's below average. There are some good things about it, and it had me toward the beginning, but then everything just got a little too cute and convenient. And I think for the second episode in a row, you and I are going to be right on together. I'm going to give this one a 3 as well, because it's not the worst of the worst, but it's not average either.
I want to point out, in the past 4 episodes, and of course we're dealing with the last 2 of season 2, and the first 2 of season 2, season 1, the first 2 of season 2, only 1 episode has gotten an above average score, and that was just because you gave A World of His Own a 6. Everything else has been average or below. So we need to get out of this rut real quickly. And
which, judging from the next few episodes, we will be.
Really? The 4-window thing? 4-door thing? Okay.
Oh, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
This should be an interesting conversation next week.
Okay, well, maybe for you after that, because I know there's a couple.
Mr. Dingle the Strong.
We've got Howling Man and Eye of the Beholder coming up.
I'm going to fight for Mr. Dingle. He's my Beavis of season 2.
Oh gosh. we each have to have a guilty pleasure one season. So, Scott, before we close out here and I give Rod's final words, do you want to tell people where they can find us?
You can find us at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. You can email us at thefrontrowmoviereviews@gmail.com. You can also find us on all your social media by either searching the Front Row Movie Reviews, or on Facebook you can also find Zone-i-Sodes itself by searching Zone Zone-i-Sodes. And whether you're listening to us on your podcast app or if you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe. And if you can, also leave us a review as well, too. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to get your feedback so we can continue to improve as we move right along into season 2 and beyond. To infinity and beyond.
Absolutely, and we're moving right along here with season 2, and sounds like we might be talking about an episode next week that might have a little disagreement. I don't know, but we'll figure it out here. But anyway, as we close out on this chapter, let me give you Rod's final words for Man in the Bottle. A word to the wise now, to the garbage collectors of the world, to the curio seekers, to the antique buffs, to everyone who would try to coax out a miracle from unlikely places. Check that bottle you're taking back for a 2-cent deposit. The genie you saved might be your own. Case in point, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Castle, fresh from the briefest of trips into the Twilight Zone. Didn't seem that brief to me, but okay. And so as we close out this episode, I am Brandon Davis.
I'm Scott McFarland.
And we will see you on the couch.
Or in the bunker, whatever comes first.
Oh. With chubby Hitler.
I see nothing. I hear nothing. I wish for nothing.
Oh, man.